Okay, so welcome everybody. So this is a sort of an experimental workshop between the Universidad de Ferro in Madrid and the KFTK in Hungary. And the reason why we're doing this is that with Jonas, we found out that we are doing quite similar stuff. And hence we asked Patricia Lorente, who is actually, or Lorente, I don't know how you pronounce your name, Patricia, sorry.
But
Lorente. Sorry, you say it more correctly. So she's doing very similar. She's working very similar topic than I do. So we figured why not do a small online workshop on this. And unfortunately, I had to miss your presentation in Barcelona, but now it's the time. So I'm really looking forward to it, and then I'll do my presentation. Everybody got in 45 minutes total. And I don't know whether, Patricia, you want the questions in between or after your presentations. You can decide.
I don't know, usually after, but like I don't mind really.
Okay, so clarification questions in between and the larger ones after. So aim for like 30 minutes, around 30 some minutes, and then we have 10, 15 minutes for questions if it's okay. Okay, thank you very much. So Patricia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. I'm a PhD student in Madrid. So I will present this stuff that I'm working on for my thesis. That the working title right now is Gender Differences in Persistence on High-Stakes Tests. What can we say about gender differences in academic achievement? So the traditional gender gaps have, for the most part, been bridged or even reversed, but the one that is still pretty much present seems to be that of the differential gender enrollment into higher academic STEM careers, and afterwards, so differential gender representation in STEM careers, which it is believed to partially influencing the differences in gender wages, since STEM careers tend to be a little bit more lucrative than social and social sciences or humanities. So that is why it is a gap that is pretty much studied. So, for example, in large assessment tests such as PISA, and when we look at this test, it seems that indeed boys still have a little bit of an edge when it comes to the performance in mathematics and sciences. However, what is important to realize is that when we look at performance in this large assessment, is that performance is not only a function of skills or knowledge, but it's also a function of effort. So when we look at these gender differences, it's important to study or acknowledge the role of different motivation and effort that can lead to these differences in performance. However, studying effort is complicated. We have several techniques, and all of them have, of course, limitations and biases. And what is most important for the study of gender differences in effort is that we can easily see how these biases are also gendered. So, for example, if there are indeed differences in ability, then using a performance measure of effort will also be biased by the differential ability by gender. Or if, for example, if we use self or teachers reports, if they hold some type of heuristics or some type of appraisals about different values of effort by gender, then of course these reports will also be biased by the previous judgment of the reporters. So regarding the study of effort and how can we overcome these limitations, there has been this recent strand in literature that proposes to measure effort as persistence or the decline of performance throughout a test. So for example, if we look at this picture here that represents what I just said, if we look at this will be the 0 will be the first question in the test, while the 1 will be the last question on the test. So this will be the duration of the test in its entirety. And this will represent the performance, the decline through that test. So that will be so it will reflect this performance decline will represent the persistence or effort in persist that the students put. So what is cool about this measure is that it's a behavioral measure, so it does not require the judgment of individuals. And regarding the gender gaps in achievement, it has indeed already been applied to study gender differences in effort in PISA tests. And the results of this study that we can see here is that female students over persist their gender, their male counterparts in persistence when we look at PISA, and this is in different of the study areas. So whether we look at the reading test or the mathematics or science test, female always seem to show more effort than male students, which is consistent with the previous literature. So in which it has been reported that female students tend to be more self-disciplined, that they value more effort, and that they consistently put more effort when there are no further incentives or in low stakes conditions. So of course, PISA is a very extraordinary test in the sense that it doesn't provide any incentives for the students to perform, since it doesn't influence their academic achievement or record, or there are no stakes. So of course, we don't know if whether these gender differences that have been shown in this PISA test are the results of the previously mentioned differences in putting effort when no further incentives are provided, so in these low test conditions. So what still remains to be
Sorry,
answered is
maybe
whether
a clarifying question. Does PISA
yeah,
have, is it all is it all multiple choice questions in PISA? Or are like, if the open questions are at the
no,
end, it doesn't matter?
I think there are more than multiple choice questions, but I don't know if
Okay.
for this particular test, I mean, for this particular study, I cannot remember how they treated that. But from
Yeah,
what I'm gonna
that's
say
fine.
afterwards, I will explain why it shouldn't matter. Because I mean, not every people don't get the questions in the same order. So I
Yeah.
will. Is that it?
So is it possible that at the end the questions are harder to answer for males for whatever reason?
No, exactly. So in PISA is not, because the order of the question is randomized. So not all the students will get the same questions at the end. So that will mean that maybe one particular student, like one particular male student, so for example, will get maybe a harder question at the end, but there will be other, but similarly, there will be other female students that will get that hard question at the end, and there will be other male students that will get it in the beginning. So I will explain right now why, for this study and for mine, it shouldn't matter that one student, for example, because it's not
Okay,
for all of
thanks.
them. No
Sorry,
worries.
may I also have a question? Why
Yes.
do we think that this measure measures effort and not tiredness, for example? Getting tired?
It measures, of course, so decline in performance will be uh l- depend on your tiredness. But I mean, if we assume that, or we assume that all the students on average, or like that particularly now for the study of difference in gender, that we have no reason to believe, for example, that male students came to the test more tired than female students, then of course, when the test like in the duration of the test, students will get more fatigue. So we're capturing here is the ability of the students to sustain their performance in spite of the tiredness. So this is what we are trying to, what we are, that it's being captured here.
If I may
Indeed, because the students get
jump
more
in.
tired. Yeah, indeed, because the students get more tired, what we are capturing here is the ability of the student to endure through that tiredness or like to maintain this performance.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fascinating debate. No, what's really behind this in terms of the mechanisms? So I think it's a fair question. But I mean, this economics literature really largely interprets performance declines as a kind of non-cognitive skills measure. Okay, so this is kind of the background where Patricia is coming from, and also in the broader project where her thesis is located. We're actually interested in trying to tease out a bit the different components. But I think it's a fair debate that we can also have towards the end again.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I can see everybody, so just yeah, I'm gonna assume that I can move on. Sorry. So yeah, what I was saying is that that of course this is that PISA is low stake exam. So what we still what is still or to be explored is whether these gender differences that have been reported in PISA using this measure can be found when there are actually incentives to perform. So using real data from exams that the students perform. So this is exactly what I'm gonna try to be doing in the study. So using real university data, trying to explore gender differences, both in performance as a like higher order phenomenon, and then zooming in persistence, and explore whether there are gender gaps in this university exams conditional on the study area. And then furthermore, we also have different stakes in the university exams to so try to see if whether these gender gaps in the study area are also functional from the stakes of the exams. So yeah, regarding the most important theoretical frameworks available for this study. So yeah, we can the most used one is that of the stereotype threat theory, which will argue that since there are already certain stereotypes about the performance of female students in STEM areas, so female students will acknowledge these stereotypes. So in situations in which these stereotypes can be confirmed, so for example in STEM subjects, that the students will feel the fear to confirm these stereotypes, which this will lead to anxiety and probably like some disengaging behavior, so like lack of effort in the subject. So of course, I will think that since we are using university data, so for the most part, students select into the programs and what they won't want to study, then I will, for example, not foresee that this will happen for female students that select into STEM careers, since I will assume that they have already overcome these stereotypes in order to decide to sign into these programs. So yeah, I was thinking, where do I have within my data, where can this stereotype threat happen? So yeah, for example, there are social science programs such as sociology or political sciences, in which students may select into the program not because of their quantitative component, but rather they may actually be role in trying to avoid that, but there are still STEM subjects such as math and statistics and quantitative methods. So perhaps in these STEM subjects within social science programs, then female students will be more susceptible to this stereotype threat. So yeah, so my hypothesis will be that indeed I will find within social science programs, I will probably not find on average a gender gap in performance or persistence when we look at non-STEM subjects, but it will be presence like handicap in women in STEM related subjects. And regarding whether this will be conditional on stakes, so for example, I will actually will think that this will be present in high stakes exams, so like finance, for example, since yeah, perhaps in exams in which everybody, like both female and male students, have the incentive to perform, then male will have a little bit of the edge because women will be handicapped by this stereotype trait, but perhaps in low stakes exams, the differential value of effort will buffer these differences so that there are no gender differences, or is maybe reverse. So yeah, to study persistence in my data, I will use the same approach that I just explained for that they use in the PISA studies, and I hope that perhaps now it comes a little bit more clear my answer to the previous questions. So yeah, this Borghans and Schill, what they propose is that when you administer a test to a group of students, and the order of the questions of that test for the students and is randomized, then the difficulty of the test on average for those students is constant throughout the test. So that the performance in the beginning of the test, so here are at time 0, or the intercept, will reflect the ability, the skills or knowledge of that group of students, while their decline in performance throughout the test will reflect their ability to maintain that performance, so like their persistence. So they estimated using this model in which the dependent variable is a dummy for whether a particular student answer a particular question correctly or incorrectly. This variable Q will reflect the position of that particular question in the test as presented to that student, and this coefficient alpha 1 will measure whether the probability of answer correctly a question declines or changes throughout the test. And as I said, this can only be estimated when the question order is randomized across the students. So yeah, in order to answer my questions, the data that I use is data from the Moodle platform from my university, the Carlos III University, and I use the exams that were performed during the academic course 2019-2020, as there were a lot of exams, high stakes and low stakes exams that were performed due to the COVID pandemic. Plus, I use information from the university administration with the student background and course characteristics information. And crucially for this study, the Moodle platform records whether the teacher selected to randomize the order of the questions. So we know whether that test was indeed randomized within the students that took that test. And besides that, we also applied a series of filters so that we think that fatigue or performance decline is plausible, and we can go through them afterwards. So this will be my sample in the end of students and tests. So yeah, to answer the questions regarding the performance, my measure of performance is just accuracy of the student in that test, so the proportion of correct answers of the student that the student was made. And we have a dummy for whether it's a STEM subject or not, gender and their interaction. And then of course a vector of covariance controlling for exam difficulty and student characteristics. And then for the persistence models, as I was saying, this is a little bit more complicated, since persistence is not a variable in my data, but I measure it through this coefficient multiplying the position of the question within the test. So yeah, I also have to use a triple interaction between gender, STEM subjects, and question order, and then to further investigate through the stakes of the exams in the detection of these gender gaps, then I divide the data between final exams and midterms. And yes, I also include a vector of covariates, the same vector of covariates regarding student quality and, well, student failure achievement and exam difficulty. And also, since I want to control not for their effect on performance in general, but for the performance as it changes throughout the test, for their effects on persistence, then they are also interacted with question order, and then I also add questions firstEFFEcts.
And why is there no gender main effect in this model?
Sorry, it is, but I forgot to say, it's just because otherwise this includes all the like lower order interactions and main effects, but just so that here it doesn't get like gigantically then either of them,
Yeah,
but I should have said, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so regarding a little bit few words on the descriptives. So yeah, the exams that come from STEP subjects account for around 11% of my data. I have around 60% of female students on average, which is, I think it's kind of like the regular proportion for the social science faculty. Yeah, as we can see, there doesn't seem to be big differences in the proportion of female and male students depending on the STEM subjects, neither in the grades to access these subjects, which I think it's coherent with the fact that after exploring the data further, the STEM subjects are all they're not elective subjects. So all the students from the program need to do these subjects. So yeah, for the first results, investigating the differences in performance depending on and the gender gap depending on the STEM and non-STEM subjects. So we can see from the baseline model that is not shown here, of course, STEM subjects, students in this faculty social science tend to show worse performance in the STEM subjects compared to the non-STEM subjects. But yeah, it seems that especially so for female students, so we can observe this gender gap here in performance of female students underperforming their male counterparts. So yeah, kind of consistent with the results that are shown in PISA when looking at performance. So yeah. And then I wanted to know whether, as I was saying, if this was somehow moderated by the stakes of the exam. So yeah, contrary to my expectations. So yeah, what we can say here is that in non-STEMs we always get the best performance of the students compared to the STEM subjects, and that we don't see differences in gender gaps when no matter we look at finals or midterms with the lowest stake exams. But yeah, when we look at finals, which was as the exams with the highest stakes, we also don't see gender gaps for these particular exams. And then when we look at midterms, of course, midterms, because there are lower stakes, then both male and female students seems to perform somehow worse. But yeah, especially so female students compared to male students.
Sorry, Patricia.
Yeah.
Why do you say that the midterm is a lower stake than the final? I didn't get that point, or I missed it.
Sorry, maybe I thought that this was kind of universal, but the final exam always represents about 60% of the grade, the weight of the exam on the subject grade.
And the midterm is 40, or the midterm is just So how is it?
Sorry?
going to- The midterm, is the midterm 40% or is just 20% and there is some other homeworks, or how is it? So it's just,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So unfortunately, we don't have particular measures of the weight of every observation that we have from this data. So for every exam, unfortunately we don't have a specific weight for all the activities. So yeah, the only way to study stakes is through this rough classification. But yeah, generally, our final exam will be around a 60%, and then the other part of the grade, the subject grade, is what is called continuous evaluation. That usually doesn't imply a exam that is almost as heavy as the final exam, but rather some sort of activities that works that the student does throughout the year. So yeah, normally assignments, maybe in addition of 10 or 20% exam, something like that. That we'll see. That's the regular
okay, thank you.
composition. Okay, is this it? Okay, so regarding persistence, sort of this descriptive representation. So yeah, this will be like the results of the model that I previously described for female and male students in non and STEM subjects, but without any sort of controls. So the kind of raw models without only with question fixed effects. So yeah, when we look at the non-STEM subjects, we do see some performance decline, and we don't see non-interaction by gender. So as we see, their performance seems to decline for both genders, but yeah, there is no interaction. And then when we look at the STEM subject sample, then yeah, we can see that there is more noise in the models. Yeah, we don't capture a performance decline for either gender. Of course, since as I have explained before, because there are less representative subjects of the social science programs, then we have less observations for these exams. So yeah, for these raw models, we start to not see no interactions. Yeah, when we look at when we add our controls of student quality and exam difficulty, we kind of see the same, which is like we see some performance decline for male students in the non-STEM subjects, but then we don't see any interaction for either gender with STEM, and we don't see any gender interaction. So yeah, yeah, we don't see gender gaps in either study area. In persistence, and yeah, and then when we divide the sample and with the same model depending on the exam type, then yeah, now we don't detect any performance decline neither by male students, or we don't see any gender gap regarding a study area. So the results that we find in performance don't seem to replicate when we try to measure the persistence. So yeah, regarding the discussion of the results, so analysis show evidence for a gender gap in performance in university exams in STEM versus non-STEM subjects within social science area. And contrary to my expectations, particularly, this gap is present in low stakes exams, but no in high stakes exams. However, the analysis show no evidence for gender gap persistence in university exams, regardless of this study area or this text. So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, these results attending to what the previous literature have found regarding the gender differences in persistence, especially in low stakes scenarios. So yeah, it could be that now having real life university exams, then the motivation of male students is incentivized, and then that they might bridge the gap in persistence that has been found in previous studies. Yeah, but of course, like this a limitation of our study, and why it also at the same time is difficult to make comparisons with from my results or my research setting with PISA results is that there are very different exams, not only in the stakes, as I was just saying before, but they're also different in the structure, as PISA is a much more taxating exam, which lasts many more, like a couple of hours. And beyond that, not only the exam is different, but then also we're using university data. So of course we may have very persistent students, very interested in their subject that's selected into our sample. Yeah, additionally, I guess I cannot oversee the fact that this sample was taken during the academic course 2019-2020 during the pandemic. So yeah, perhaps there is some sort of influences because of the pandemic, not only in the fatigue of the students, but perhaps also in the setting in which the students did the test and so on. And that's it.
Yes, thank you very much. So if anybody has questions, now is the time.
May I have one? Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear some, yes.
I'll translate, or not translate, but
Yeah, okay.
really loud.
I missed to see your presentation, but when you measure performance over time, then do you, and you see some decline, then is it driven by non-response to those questions, or do they make more mistakes in the end?
So
I think,
when you measure,
yeah.
could you hear it?
I think I understood that whether it could be non-response, or maybe you are concerned about the students running out of time or something. Is that or is that what was the question? I don't.
Yes, that's the concern.
That was okay. Yeah. So we did for us, for me in my analysis, the questions at the so the non-response question and the wrong questions, they're all count as the same. However, I use the information in these filters that I explained before. I don't know if this is I select, for example, the students that had a 40% NA. So, for example, that I could believe that they were dropouts. I eliminated from my sample so they don't like inflate the estimation persistence. It is not an exam person that try to do the whole exam. And then I also have a filter for the time constraining of the exam. So based on that, like trying to eliminate students that run out of time. Yeah, if once applied this filter, I haven't made an inquiry about whether there will still be mostly non-answer or wrong questions.
Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, thanks for the great presentation. I have one question, namely, is it possible that that selection has to do something with the results? For instance, let's say it's sociology. This is stereotypically a female field of study. So the males that select into sociology may select because of more of an interest rather than lack of mathematical rigor, for instance. I have no idea that's the case, but that would explain why men tend to do better on STEM subjects, because if the motivation is different between the two genders, then it will actually have nothing to do with the effort, but more like people simply self-selecting into things that are quite good for them. You get what I'm
Sorry,
saying? So let's say you have
Uh,
a girl and you have a boy, and they have to choose for sociology. The motivation may be different. The sociology is stereotypically a female thing. So they may select into it if they're thinking, oh, I may not be that good in math, so let's select into sociology. Whereas for a boy, because they have to pass a stereotypical barrier, they may choose for sociology not based on mathematical rigor, but choosing because of interest. So they may be inherently better at the quantitative things than the girls, because of simply the motivation is different.
Yeah, I mean, I have no way to know whether there is difference in motivation into the selection of the
Yeah, but
program.
you can, for instance, check some. Do you have some observable things? Maybe some initial test scores from, like, I don't know, maybe previous something, and check whether there are initial differences before they even do this test between the boys and the girls.
I mean, I can see whether they have difference in performance, but I don't know if it's the difference is a function of different motivation or different and actual skills.
Yeah. Okay, but I think it's something to think about, because like social sciences are inherently a stereotypically female fields.
Yeah, I find it an interesting thought, Danny. I just wonder, so it's not like the male students that enter university have like this enormous edge on the female students in terms of math in general, right? Maybe they have a slight one, right? According to what we know from standardized tests on average. But then, I mean, wouldn't the self-selection into STEM fields outweigh that? So, I mean, in other words, where would we expect the not so strong in math boys to go, right? Somewhere then
true.
there should be also, right? So
Yeah.
if we suppose in engineering you get the males with a higher propensity for formal rigor, yeah, I guess I can't quite see why we would have like a strong self-selection of males into non-STEM.
Yeah,
I'm sure cases like this exist. I think it's plausible.
Yeah.
Just I mean, I guess in terms of like big numbers, I'm not sure whether it's very plausible.
Yeah.
Patricia, can you go back to that slide, the midterm and final exam thing? Yeah, here. Yeah, so I don't. Can you explain that to me again? I'm really in a bit lost. I understand why the final is a high stakes exam. That's fine. What I'm not sure about is I don't know the system. So whether the midterm exam, isn't it also a high stakes thing? It's just before the final.
I mean, I think that of course the setting of the data in itself is high stakes in the sense that I mean it does have some incentives and so stakes because it will always influence your it will have some repercussion for you. It will affect your academic track. So in that sense, of course, there are still staked exams, but they don't come. They are not as high stakes at the other exams, and unfortunately, as I was saying, I cannot use my sample to, for example, have a measure of what will be the average midterm weight in my sample. I could maybe use university data to try to get to this information if they have it, but I will say just like having a rough estimation, usually it's around the half. So of course it's still like maybe perhaps between a 20% and 20 or 25% of the grade in the subject, but yeah, it's still like half of the or less than half that what will be the final. So yeah, that's basically like the only variation in the stakes that I have.
But okay, even if I accept that the midterm is a lower stakes than the final,
Yeah.
then just reading this graph and the results would say that females are actually putting more effort into the final exam when it's higher stakes because they are scoring better.
Yeah.
And so that's like quite the opposite of what you're finding. So females put more effort. I know that effort, I understood effort differently now, but how you have measured with this persistence measure. But claiming that the cognitive abilities of people didn't change between the midterm and the final, and it's only driven by effort, which is a large assumption, I know. But if this is true, then females are performing worse relative to themselves in low stakes tests than in high stakes tests, as opposed to boys. Just looking at this.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that was my interpretation. I don't know if it was clear, and if it was clear, and that's why I thought it was like against my initial thought that will be that actually male students will be putting less effort in the midterms than female students because or in the midterms compared to the final because of the previous literature. But yeah, I will agree that of course this is a performance measure. So yeah, cognitive skills may not change by knowledge, but knowledge will. So of course it implies, but perhaps they put more effort in the preparation period to or like we cannot know whether they put more exam in the or persistence in the test because the results of the persistence measure are not so clear. But I will argue, as you say, that maybe their cognitive skills didn't improve, but perhaps they put more effort in the preparation period to arrive or like with more knowledge or more with more capabilities of put more effort in the exam overall.
Okay, thank you. Good. Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Patricia.
Thank you.
Now, if there's no more questions, that I'm taking over the screen sharing, and I'll do a presentation in a minute.
Thanks for the questions, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great presentation. Thank you. Very interesting. By the way, if you have anything written, I'll be happy to have it. So if you have a draft,
thank you so much. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, and thanks again, Daniel, for really pushing for having this this joint workshop and doing it online, providing the infrastructure, which is lovely. It's really nice to have this opportunity to engage with you guys, and it's really nice to have such a lively crowd from your side interested in gender differences and education. So we're really much looking forward now to seeing Daniel Horn's presentation on a related subject. No, we don't hear anything right now.
No, I don't hear. Sorry.
Can you? No?
Okay, can you hear us now? Okay, hold on, it's just something.
Yes.
The computer froze actually, so in a minute we'll try to get back. Just sending me warning messages all the time, so it's not good. I try to share screen. Okay. Adobe, why? Come on. I cannot open my PDF. No. Hold on. Hold on, we got into the trouble. Couple of minutes. What we can do is we open another computer and start my presentation from my own computer.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Can you hear us now? Okay, I'm present for a different computer now, and but this is really good here. Okay. Can you hear us? And
I can.
I'll bring this closer.
I can, yes.
Louder. Okay, fail to detect speaker. If you can hear me, that's just the wrong message.
I can hear you. That's fine. What's the
Okay.
problem?
I can hear you.
What is not sounding? But the computer, why is it not? Come on. Okay, you can now see me and hear me.
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, and now can I do this? Okay. You can see me, hear me, and see my presentation at the same time.
Yes.
Very good.
We cannot hear now.
What, okay, can you speak so I can hear?
I can speak.
One,
But I
two,
don't know whether
I
you
three.
hear you.
I cannot.
I can't. No, just
Test. One,
Okay.
two, three.
Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you.
Great.
Everything. Oh shoot. Okay. Sorry. And it's not working. Now it's working. Super. So this is a work in progress. My question is basically.
You can see your head.
Okay. You can move away. So the question is basically what I try to answer is whether the presence of high-stake testing, so the testing itself, whether this has an effect on, well, the essential question is whether this has an effect on human capital, but how I can test the human capital is a later low-stake test. So the question is whether the effect of a high-stake test have an effect of a later low-stake test. That is basically students study for the test, the high-stake test, and later they have higher ability to take a low-stake test score intended to measure human capital. So specifically in this setting, I look at how much better age 12 students applying to an elite track where there's an entrance exam, which is high-stake test in January, whether they perform better in May in a low-stake testing compared to those who didn't take this test, the non-applicants. Obviously, there's a large selection effects going on because smarter students tend to apply more than low ability students. This is where I put all my effort into showing you that it's a causal effect and not only a selection thing. What I do is I do lots of, I do like 4 types of different estimations, but I'll show you the within and the between school matching results. And if there's time, I'll talk quickly about the IV as well. And I also test the different gender differences between this effect and within this effect. So what do we know? The fact that the incentives matter on the test is not very new. So the whole No Child Left Behind is basically on this. So if you measure with high or low stakes students, for high stakes, they will study more. They put in more effort in high stake testing, and in low stake testing, they put less effort in. This is not a new thing to find. Where, in this respect, what I try to add is that if there is high stake testing, that has a long-term effect on low-stake testing as well. As always, psychologists or educationists have long shown this before the economists. So there are, educational studies that show that if you increase testing, if you increase the stakes of testing, students will put more effort into this. Now, newer studies, especially in the macro level, so state or country level, so German state or country level, show that wherever there is high stakes centralized exit exams, these states tend to perform better on low stakes international exams such as TIMSS or PISA. In fact, a very new study by Bergbauer, Hanushek, and Grissman, which is not a causal study, just a descriptive, but they look at lots of evidence. They argue that if countries or states, German states, would introduce these high-stake testing or centralized exit exams, that would increase actually the results in the PISA, OECD PISA testings. Now, in psychology, this effect that I'm looking for, it's called the testing effect. You know, the fact that testing enhances the ability to apply learned information in varied future settings or contexts. This is called the testing effect or the test enhanced learning, as opposed to, let's say, you know, teachers giving homeworks or other practices how you can learn for students. This testing effect is quite different from the one that I'll try to disentangle, the test taking ability. So that is when somebody has learned how to take tests, will be better at taking tests at a later point in time. And I'm hoping that what I try to show is what I can show is this testing effect and not the test taking ability. I am not yet convinced that I can do that, but you will be the judge. Okay, if there's any question, let me know, and then I'll stop. Now, on gender heterogeneity, Patricia talked much more about it, and this is less of the focus of my talk, but I do address this. What we see is that women perform. What we see is that there is always a relative difference between men and women in high and low stakes testing. That is, men benefit more from high stakes testing than women. So women outperform men in a quite good study by Azmat Saminga and Isiberi. They show in a Spanish secondary school, actually a quite large private secondary school, that as the stakes increase through the year, men tend to decrease the difference between, so that the gender gap, which is always in favor of girls, tend to decrease. So if stakes are increasing, the gap between men and women, or boys and girls, are decreasing. Men are also likely to put more effort in high stakes than women, and men react to competition more than women. These are from earlier studies. My addition to this, that I try to show that this gap still remains long for months after the high stake testing is gone, so we can still detect this in low stake tests. Okay. Quickly about the Hungarian context. It's known for everybody in this room, but maybe for some of you in online not. So we have 3 years of pre-primary education, typically 8 years of primary general school, and typically 4 years of secondary track education. Now, what I'm interested in is basically these two, which I will call elite tracks, that select students at age 10 and at age 12 into an 8-year-long and a 6-year-long education program. So the best and smartest students can opt out from the primary general programs and enter these elite tracks if they want to. This is clearly optional. So there is huge selection going on from both the student side and the school side. Now, how students can go into these elite tracks? There is an entrance exam typically, but there are 3 types of entrance requirements. One is what I will call the GPA only. When there is no entrance exam, it's only that you have to have very, very good grades, typically 5s only, so that you can get into these schools. The second level is in addition to the GPA, so GPA always have to be taken into account. In addition to this, there is the entry exam requirement when the students have to take a centralized entry exam. So this is the same for everybody. In January, this is my high stakes test. unfortunately, I don't see the results from these high-stake tests. What I see is whether a student have taken or have not taken this test. This is in reading and in Hungarian language and literature. And then an additional layer is the oral exam, which can only be added to this if the school requires the entry exam itself. So the oral exam cannot be without the high stakes exam. So what I'm going to do is separate these two samples. I will have the GPA only sample and the high stake testing or the entry exam sample. And obviously a sample where their students have not applied to these elite tracks, so there are the non-applicants. And then question. To Patricia. Okay, that's not for me. So this red line is in January, and then 4 months later we have the NABC. This is the National Assessment of Basic Competencies. This is the universe of students in grade 6, so everybody has to write it, but there are some exceptions, but not very important. And this is clearly a low-stake test for everybody. This is in reading and math. In my sample now it's a bit more since 2021. This is only important for school and not the student. So this is going to be my low stakes exam. The entry exam, I only see whether somebody has taken or not. The NABC I see for everybody. So this is the setup. The data, this is where my troubles are coming actually. So I have basically 2+1 data sets that you need to know. The first is this National Assessment of Basic Competencies that I've mentioned. This is an individual level data on the universe of 6th, 8th, and 10th grade students, around 100,000 students per cohort. I have the data from 2008 to 2019. This is an individual panel between 6th and 8th and 10th grade. Test of mathematics and reading literacy, very similar to the PISA, so lots of background information on parents, books at home, etc. I also know where the students live. Yeah.
Can I ask Daniel? So this NABC, you called it low stakes. It's really no stakes, right? Would that be more correct?
Yes, I call it low stakes is because the school have stakes in it. So every year there is a school report that we by school. So this is high stakes for medium stakes for a school, but no stakes for the students. But teachers can transform some of these pressure into the students. So
do the students learn about their performance?
They could, but after like 1 year, and because the parents have also access to the data. But just an anecdotal, story. I never looked at my kids' results. Albeit, I'm really interested in.
Okay, gotcha.
So, so probably not.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is the universe of students, and then we have the secondary level enrollment information system in Hungary, and it's KIFIR, which is the official application data. So this is when a student is applying to any school, this is where they have to register. So we know this is not even applicant, but it's application level data. So we know whether a student. So we only have students in here who applied. So we have the 6th graders, and we have only partial, like less than 10% of 6th graders are actually applying to these elite schools. So we observe them, we observe their applications, we observe the primary school, primary general school, we observe the secondary school where they're applying, and we observe whether they have been accepted to that given school or not. So this is the application data. But unfortunately, these two data sets cannot be merged like officially on the individual level. So what I can do is match these two data sets on observable characteristics. That is the primary school, the gender, and the given year of the application, and the birth year and month of the students. So this is what I'm going to do is I do try to do a matching in between these two, the NABC and the KIFIR. The third data set is a simple data set that's basically a huge matrix between the distance between all zip codes to all zip codes. And this is where I will, if I have time, I'll do my instrument, which is to measure how far each student lives from the closest elite track. So this is basically just a different sample. And I can match it to the student on the zip code level. Okay, so how do I match the application data to an NABC? As I said previously, I connect it on the individual level based on observables. I'll here. This is the better slide. So basically, I look at their gender, the birth year, birth month, their sending. Oh, I don't use the receiving school here. Sorry, this is a earlier slide, so I don't use the receiving school currently. So I'm only using the primary gender, so general school, and obviously the year of application. So a student will be treated. I'll call a student treated when I find them in both data sets, right? So when he or she is in the application data set, and I find her perfectly in the NABC data set. If I find two similar students in the universe of students, in the NABC students, then I drop them. Okay, so the only time when I say a student is treated in my key field data is when I find her, him in the NABC data perfectly. So in a given school, in a given year, there is only one boy in a given that was born in a given month. Okay, if there are two boys born in a given month, I drop those students. And the control students will be the ones who I don't find their pair in the application data, so in the key field data. So I find, I see all students who are in the universe, and I don't see anybody with similar characteristics who apply to any elite tracks. That's the setup. So I have the treated who are surely treated. I have the controls who are surely controls, and anybody who is in between, I just drop them. This is a clearly a non-representative database, and this is only a problem if those who are found treated, so I find treated, they would, react differently to high or low stakes exams than those who I don't find, who are dropped treated. This is an assumption I make, that they are very similar to them. Yeah, I cannot do really anything about it.
So is it possible? Is it true that the more people apply for elite schools, the more likely you will drop them?
The more people, yeah, like year by year.
Or by class by class. So if
Yes.
I don't know, 20 from 25 students apply for an elite school and to the same place because that's the one is close, then there's a higher chance that you cannot identify them by gender, birth year, and month.
That's true.
Okay.
Exactly. Actually, I find like 50 to 70% of students, which is not that bad. Here is the data. I mean, the number of students that I find. So total in my data set, 7 years of data, I have 654,000 observations. I dropped a little less than 9,000 due to a weird age, which is over 14. I dropped those over 14. Remember, these are 12-year-old students, so they are 2 years older than they're supposed to be. So I drop those. I drop the multiple matches are the ones who applied, but I cannot find the perfect pair. That's a little less than 90,000. And I drop all the schools, all students from all schools that have no treated in a given year. So I end up with 22,000 treated students and around a little less than 300,000 control students. And I split the sample into Budapest and non-Budapest because in Budapest there are much more schools. My IV doesn't work there, and just a different sort of sample. So yeah, these are the numbers. Okay. So first, the big field school matching. So what I do, what I want to do is find pairs for all treated. I observe the treated students, and I want to find very, very similar pairs to these treated students. I look at the first applications only because I assume that whoever is applying to a school will, well, there is the selection mechanism is such that there is no need for there are no incentives for students to cheat in this, so not to provide the pure preferences in these applications. So every student will put their first preference in the first place, and basically like 2/3 of the students anyway apply to one school only. I drop students in Budapest because I do between school matching and and IB doesn't work there, so I can go into details, but it's not important here. And I do first an exact matching on gender, year, and the GPA quintile. So I create these very small boxes. I put each treaty student and each control student in these very small boxes. And within these very small boxes, I do a propensity score matching on various socioeconomic backgrounds. Mothers and fathers education, whether they receive a subsidized or free lunch, whether they receive free books, the mother is working or not, father is working or not, and that's it. So I create a propensity score matching, and I do a one-to-one matching. So basically, I try to find within these very small exact matching cells the most similar student based on their SES, the parental background. Okay, so this is a one-to-one matching. And I do it 4 times. This between school matching I do for 4 different samples. The baseline is just I take the treated and I find very similar non-control students to them using the same thing. In the GPA only sample, I look at those students who applied to a GPA only school, so they didn't take the exam. So their first preference was a GPA only school. And then try to find matches to them. The third one is when I look at those students who go to an entry exam school, so whether they had to take a high stakes exam, and I try to find good matches to them. And the fourth one, I look at those who applied to an entry exam school, and I try to find very similar matches to them from the GPA only sample. So both of them actually applied, right? So if my theory is correct, I should see an effect in the baseline and the entry exam and in the GPA versus exam samples, but not in the GPA only sample. Because in the GPA only sample, students didn't take a high stakes exam, right? Balázs.
Perhaps I do not understand it correctly, but it is true that in the GPA treatment, in the control group are people who applied for an exam school, and in the exam treatment, in the controls are people who applied for a GPA school. Is
Controls, the controls are always those who, not always, the controls in the first three samples are those who never apply to anywhere.
Okay, thanks.
Only in the last sample, the GPA versus exam, that's where I compare the applicants. That's where I have those samples with both were applied. Okay. This is the data. So the baseline sample, I have the largest data that, the 25,000 basically split. GPA on the sample is 4,000, little less than 4,000. The exam sample is 9,000, and the GPA versus example sample is 3,000. This is quite small, remember, because this is for 7 years. Plus, I will include here school fixed effect, so quite small samples. So the identification strategy is a simple OLS. Basically, where on the left-hand side, I have the math test score, the low stakes math test score from May. The treatment is the AP, is the application to an LE track in these 4 different samples. I control for gender and the SCS polynomial and the GPA quintiles, basically stuff that I included in the matching. It doesn't matter if I include it or not. I trust it. I just put it in because they don't hurt. And I include primary school fixed effects and year fixed effects in this regression. So I think it's quite good as for observables, but still there is a possibility that there is a reverse causality going on. Still, the same idea. More motivated students who want to apply, they do both. They're more likely to apply and more likely to do better in math tests. So if you have higher math scores, in general, you're more likely to apply. So Y has an effect on the AP testing. I tried to solve this by using the distance I tried to solve this using an IV, the distance from school to the closest LE track in grade 6. I'll get back to this in a minute. Now, before I go to results, let me explain you the other identification that I do is within school matching. You know, this is much stronger because I now compare basically classmates or schoolmates. Here I do a many-to-many matching because the number of observations so small, basically, that I create very tiny cells using gender, the year, the GPA quintiles, and the SES quintiles. You know, I create these very small cells, and I match students within these cells, basically. So if I find any treated within this very small cell and any control within this very small cell, I say that they are pairs. So that might be there are more treated and more controls in a given cell. Obviously, if there's only treated and only control, they are dropped from my estimation. So I can only look at those where I have both controls and pairs in a given sample. Yeah, altogether I have 19,000 observations, and in the treated group and in the control group 10,000 controls, so a little fewer controls because of the many-to-many match. This is actually what Balázs was mentioning, that you know, if you have a school with many students that are applying, then there could be that, you know, from one class there are 5 students applying and 10 are not, but these 5 students are the best students. Then there might be that only one of these 10 are actually very similar to the 5 applying, because the other 9 are not applying because they're lower SES or lower skilled and stuff like that, or lower GPA. Okay. Oh yeah, and of these 19,000, 13,000 or a little less than 14,000 applied to exam schools. So those were with high stakes exams, and a little more than 4,000 applied to GPA only schools. Hence, my identification strategy is such that on the left-hand side, I have again the 6th grade maths and reading scores as before. I have now 2 treatments, whether somebody applied to an exam school or whether somebody applied to a GPA only school. And I control for, as fixed effects, I control for these match IDs. So basically, these are within cell average differences, within these matching cell average differences. Okay. Results. Now here are the very basic baseline results. So the first 2 columns are basically the full sample and nothing is controlled, sort of. So the main difference in 6th grade math low stake test is 0.6 or more, almost 0.7 of a standard deviation. This is how much smarter or better or whatever students are who are applying to the ELITE tracks versus those who are not applying. So the first is just a raw difference. Then, you know, I take the matched sample. So the first 2 columns are not the matched sample, but the full sample. Everything that I could match in the NADC and the computer. And then I look at the matched sample in the 3rd and 4th. And I control for the year fixed effects and the primary school fixed effects. This difference halves. And then when I control for the individual controls, then this goes down to 0.25 in math and 0.20 in reading. So these are basically my baseline estimates. And then if I take this baseline estimate in math first, and I split the sample into non-applicants versus GPA applicants, the non-applicants versus the exam applicants, and the GPA applicants versus the exam applicants. This is where I think I want to see the effect. So in the second column, I don't here. I didn't expect to find any effect, and there is no effect, albeit it's a bit, you know, it's 0.6 is not nil. The 0.27 in a no applicants versus exam is exactly the one that I was expecting for, and the GPA versus exam is 0.10, a little larger than 0.10. This is a very strong result. Actually, this shows that those students who went to schools that are required high stakes exam versus those students who went to elite schools that didn't require high stakes exam, the first group scored in a low stakes exam 0.1 standard deviation higher later in low stakes exam, right? So this is what I claim to be sort of a causal effect, the lower bound of a causal effect. We find very similar, albeit a bit lower effect sizes in reading. But if you note the second and the fourth column, they're not really different. One is significant, the other is not, but they're not different. But this doesn't mean, so the one doesn't rule out the other. So there is a selection going on, we know that, and there also can be a causal effect. This is what I aim for. So that the two are similar in size, it doesn't matter anything. It's not important, I think. It just shows that there is a selection going on. Now, if I don't believe this, like now the main effects in reading and math, so the 0.2 in reading and 0.25 in math, let's use an instrument. Let's say that if you're living farther away from an LE track, you're less likely to apply. Why? Because costs are higher. But this distance from an LE track shouldn't have an effect on your ability of taking a test, human capital or testing ability or anything, right? So this is basically the first graph on the top left hand is the full sample, where I see that the distance from the LE track and the probability of application correlates negatively, albeit, you know, the monotonicity of the instrument doesn't really hold quite well. Probably because people living right, so at 0 kilometers, it shouldn't work, the IV. So I dropped those living very, very close to an LE track. And then it's the second graph on the top right corner. And then I drop those who are living very, very far, where distance probably not the most important indicator. Bottom line story is basically where I believe this IV works the best is between 1 kilometer and 10 kilometers. This is where still the distance can be traveled every day. We're talking about 12-year-olds. But still, the distance matters when the parents or the student is deciding on application or applying or not. So on the bottom right corner, you see that where I think the IV works the best. So this is the sample which I will use, living 1 to 10 kilometers away from LE track. And this is the sample. So basically, the first column is the same exact thing that I did so far, only for this smaller sample. I cut it off. And the second column is the IV. And the two are very, very, very similar to each other. So this for me is a, suggestion, or this is how I read, is that this 0.25 is a causal effect of taking a high-stake test on a later low-stake testing. I don't see any effect on the GPA sample, and I do see a larger effect on the exam sample, Balázs.
Sorry, where is more observation in the IV than in the OLS?
Very good. I spent like 20 minutes figuring it out, because in the OLS I put general school fixed effects, OMID, so school fixed effects, and there are like 170 some students who are the lone students in a given school. So when you put fixed effects, they fall out. They're just dropped.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we see the same thing in reading, basically. Okay, and then go for the within school matching estimates. And I do see that the same story as before. So there is a 0.25 in math, not in Budapest. So far I've only talked about not Budapest. Now I can include Budapest because I do the within school thing. But the story is very similar in Budapest and in non-Budapest. So there's a larger effect in math, and there is some selection going on into the GPA only school, but this is smaller than the effect of high stakes exam on low stakes exam. Okay, so far. So these are the results that I so far believe in. Now I'm going to show you the results that I don't really yet believe. The gender heterogeneity, which is, I think, the most important, most exciting part of this whole thing. And I see some results which are, good, and some which are not that good, as for my story goes. So if I include just a simple interaction into my between school estimates, so these are exactly the same. Just look at the first two columns now, okay, the 1 and 2. what we see is that boys benefit, and I'm going to use this causal word, boys benefit more from taking a high stakes exam, and girls benefit less. Not that much less, but it's significantly different. So boys benefit like 0.27 of a standard deviation, and girls benefit 0.05 standard deviation less than boys. This is the story that the literature says that girls benefit less from high stake testing because in reading you see the same thing. Now, if you look at third and fourth, this is where actually we should see no effect because we compare students who apply to an elite track but didn't take the high stakes exam. And we do see that boys benefit from this and girls benefit just as less than in the previous two estimates. And the same story holds for the last, the fifth and the sixth. So I cannot really differentiate between the GPA and the high stakes exam stories. There still might be a selection and still might be a causality, but it's not that I don't like these results so far. Any suggestions how to interpret them? I'm open to. If I do the same thing using the within school interactions, actually the story is again very similar. The main effects are the boys' effects, the interaction effects are the girls' effects, minus the boys' effects. And we see that in both the exam, so taking a high stakes exam, in the exam times female has a negative impact, and the GPA times the female also is a negative, albeit these are very non-significant. Bear in mind, albeit the number of observation is very high, it's 20,000. These regressions have like 10,000 fixed effects in them because this is why I control for the matched sample. So the degrees of freedom are not very large here. Okay. So gender story, I don't know. And the most important critique that I already knew, but it also came up in Barcelona, was that actually I don't see any effect on human capital. What I see is an effect on testing ability, right? The students who take the high stakes exam learn how to take tests. Hence, in the low stakes exam, they do better testing. So I try to give an answer to this. It's a very, very small sample. What I did is I looked at the GPA only schools. So I looked at the secondary schools that didn't require any entry exam. And I looked at students who got into these schools. They didn't require any entry exam, but some of the students actually have taken an entry exam and they weren't accepted to their first, but to their second choice, right? So they ended up in a GPA only school, but they have taken the entry exam. Okay, so what I do is I compare classmates in secondary school in the elite schools, but one which have taken the high stakes exam and the other that didn't take the high stakes exam. Okay, and I only look at these GPA only schools. So basically, in the first column is I compare classmates, one in secondary schools, one who took the entry exam, the other who didn't take the entry exam. And the difference between them is 0.25, very similar to my estimate so far. If I look at the 8th grade effect, it's still very similar. But if I control for the 6th grade test scores, this difference drops down to 0.05 and non-significant. Okay, so if I were to find, I'm not sure that I interpreted correctly because, human capital effects can go through the 6th grade math score as well. But, it might be that I see only a testing effect. My counter argument would be that if I see a testing effect, I shouldn't see any difference in 8th grade math, because by that time, everybody has taken an exam, a low stakes exam in 6th grade, right? So everybody should have learned how to take tests. But this is a very small sample, you know, very couple of schools only, so it's quite biased. Anyways, same thing in reading, so it's not different. Okay. Oh no, sorry, this is not reading. This is the gender stuff. Oh, this is if you're not lost yet, which I think you are, but in this very, very small and weird sample, I see that all the story of, you know, learning comes only through the boys. So any main effect goes through only for boys and nothing for girls. Okay. Which I'll take it with a pinch of salt because it's very small, but it's in line with my expectations. Anyways, it's been quite long. We ran out of time anyway, so if you have any comments or questions, I'll be open to them. Any comments? Zoli, here you have a question.
For me, your fourth strategy or match sample is the most promising.
The within, which one?
No. The between school, but when you compare GPA only applicants with entrance exam school applicants. Now, I think that this is a very good idea, but there's a problem that there's self-selection. I mean, in terms where the student applies to a GPA only school or school with an entrance exam requirement. But I think that you could use here variation, the geographical variation in the availability of schools. So in many small towns, there's only one elite school, which is either GPA only or an exam school. And if you can leverage this variation, then this would be the most convincing part for me, at least.
Okay.
And I also have a question. I don't really get the point that you match students across schools, so between schools, but at the same time you use school fixed effects, and some of the school fixed effects will be identified from treated students only, other school fixed effects from control students only, so it's a bit confusing.
It's from the primary school, and that.
Yeah, I see. But,
okay, yeah. But then those will be dropped where there is only one of there is no variation. So if you include fixed effects, those are dropped because they're multi-color.
No, but you have.
No.
Okay. Anyway, it's my.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Thank you. Jonas?
Yeah, thank you. Great to see this fleshed out even more. You didn't have as much time in Barcelona, but yeah, I think it's a very witty design and ingenious use of this very rich and large data set, and it's quite stunning how these relatively large effects survive all this statistical fireworks that you're throwing at them. So I think there seems to be something going on for sure. I would just like to hear your reaction to yeah, let's say playing devil's advocate here. You were very concerned in trying to kind of discard the alternative interpretation of these effects reflecting test-taking behavior. And I think you were very convincing at that. However, I wonder what about the alternative interpretation of this being about motivation, educational aspirations, parents strategizing, and pushing students both to apply to these elite schools within the this kind of early tracking, apply to the more demanding schools that I understand would then more likely to ask for a standardized test on top of the GPA requirements, and yeah, and then also push their kids hard after they enroll in these in these later stages and perform better in school. So this seems to me like the more kind of important thread right now to your, at least to this interpretation. I mean, you can, to what you find here. So I mean, you can roll out lots of selection based on on GPA and SES and so on. But I mean, I just wonder what would be your answer to that. And then another kind of more big picture question would be, because this paper, you know, once kind of finished, I guess it would be kind of, could be used at least to advocate for more standardized testing, right? That would be your argument. Like if there's a pure testing effect, then we should probably test more, because that would boost everybody's human capital, right? So I just wonder, because I mean, you did cite the previous economics research that points towards these positive spillover effects, but you didn't really say anything about the more critical voices that also exist in this literature, right? About standardized testing, where there's, you know, obviously from a cross-cultural perspective, there's the racial bias that has been obviously a prevalent theme from the IQ debates onwards, right? But that persists, where there seem to be still kind of linguistic biases in the way many of these tests are kind of phrased, that kind of favor majority students, both on SES, but also on dimensions such as ethnicity or race and other potential relevant factors that should be considered, I guess, if we were to advocate for more massive large-scale testing. So I'd love to hear what you think, if you once you get the policymakers in the room, if this would be something you'd be pushing for.
Okay, thank you. So for the first one, it's a very, very good point. I don't know how to answer this, especially so. What you were claiming, and I actually agree that if there is an unobserved parental difference between applicants and non-applicants, or applicants to exam schools and non-applicants, we do see the same thing in low-stake testing as well, because they find school more important, and we do see that 2 years later, because school is more important still, right? And plus, my main worry is that I think my IV would exactly grab at this, because if school is more important, then these parents would take their kids to school from a larger distance, right? So it's a very, very important comment, and I don't know how to respond to this, but thank you. Secondly, is actually, the second comment I did thought of this is exactly why I go for the gender differences, because initially, and actually I do believe in this, that if you study hard for a test, you will do better at the later test as well. I mean, this is sort of like common sense. When I talked to my wife about it, she was like, "This is what you work on." I mean, this is so trivial. I mean, come on. But then when you can show gender differences in this, the policy advice is less obvious, right? So if this benefits boys more than girls, then it's not that obvious that we should really pushing for this. Or then, so this is exactly why I tried to go for gender differences. Actually, I was trying to go for the SES differences as well at the very beginning. If you remember, my initial talk in Barcelona was social and gender differences, but I don't see anything in SES heterogeneity. There is none. Probably because this whole setup is for the higher status, so there just don't have a huge variation in the socioeconomic status in this. So as for the policy conclusion, no, I wouldn't go for full-blown high stakes exam for everybody, exactly because of these heterogeneous effects. But on the other hand, I do believe if you're pushing students, they put more effort into it. However, you understand effort, and they will be better, which is. But this doesn't, as for the equality dimension, this is not obvious answer. So that's my two responses. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? If not, then thank you all. We're 10 minutes also in over schedule. So thanks again, and for the our friends in Madrid, we'll keep in touch.
Lovely. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cool.